Hello, Paul Johnson here for Film Obsessive. I'm speaking today with Kanin Guntzelman, who's written and directed a short narrative film recently featured at the Santa Barbara International Film Festival. It's called 2 Cents and a Footlong, and it takes place during a single order at a sub sandwich shop. So, welcome, Kanin. Where are you joining us from today?
I'm joining from Los Angeles, specifically El Segundo, which is the jewel of California. That's all I'm saying.
Awesome. Now, some of our readers and listeners have seen your film, others not. Can I have you talk a little bit about what it is that occurs during this single sandwich order?
Absolutely. So, 2 cents and a foot long is essentially about a gentleman who goes into a 24-hour sub shop to get some food at about 4 in the morning. And just as he's about to order, the employee asks him, "How's it going?" Which then forces the customer to assess every decision he's ever made in his entire life as his sandwich is being prepped for him. And this causes basically a reflection with that character, the customer, um, to maybe examine choices that he's not proud of, to explore uh, wishing maybe he had lived a different life. And in that moment, desperately needing to find some connection. And the employee just happened to be the target closest to him. And the story is about that process and what ends up happening as a result of that.
Yeah, it's a pretty fascinating film, and I noticed that the performances is really full of those awkward and uncomfortable moments in polite dialogue where we know we're supposed to say something polite and appropriate. And your protagonist, if we'll call him that, Roger, is rejecting that, really searching for something more authentic and honest, even if it's pretty painful.
See, exactly. And that's the thing is the inspiration, funnily enough, the inspiration for the whole film happened from a real situation that I was in where years ago, I was really kind of down and out. Things weren't working out. I was in a really rough spot, and I ended up going to a Subway at 4 in the morning to eat my feelings. And as I walked in there, I was coming from a bar, and my mind was racing all over the place. And I walked in there just spinning about a couple decisions I had made in the weeks prior, and all these things. And this employee looks at me and just goes, "Hey man, how's it going?" And as he said it to me, my mind just exploded because I was just sitting there going, "Do I tell this guy how my life is a crashing zeppelin? Do I tell this guy how I think my best years are behind me, and I basically am now living a life which I will only regret? Do I unload on this person?" And in the moment, I caught myself, and I was like, "No, I'm going to choke this down. This isn't for him. It's my business, my weight." And I went about it, but the interaction never left me. And I thought about it a lot because, you know, in that time I was so full of pain and uncertainty that I wished, I had said something to just, and who knows what would have happened. But then, years later, I was compelled to sit down and explore the concept of what if I had taken the step and said something then.
Yeah, what if, so to speak, you had told the truth and your character Roger does tell the truth. I saw in your press materials it was kind of his Howard Beale moment, so to speak.
Yes, exactly. So, one of the big sort of instigating factors of me sitting down to write this was after I had watched Network, and of course, the famous, Howard Beale freak out on live television. And in that situation, of course, it's on a 10, it's going viral for the 70s sort of a situation. And so it was definitely going to be a more intimate situation in my film, but I was so inspired about just the idea of I'm going to tell the truth no matter what the consequences are. And in this moment, I will be 100% honest. And even if the situation does not call for that in any way, shape, or form. And so, like, it was that sort of feeling and that sort of someone bearing their soul that I wanted to have in more intimate setting, obviously at a sub shop. But at the same time, to me, it's almost, I'm not going to say it's just as impactful as Network. Obviously, it's a classic, but I'm saying it's just as significant because more than ever, when you're in an interaction with an employee, or you go to Target, or you know, I feel like everyone knows the script. Everyone knows, okay, we're going to have the quick, quiet pleasantries. We're not going to hold this up. We're not going to really challenge each other's opinions. We're not going to reveal too much because that is uncomfortable. It's awkward. It's this or it's that. And in the middle of this dance that we've all done 1,000 times every single day when we're going to all these places, for someone to go, no, 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 I'm gonna break this dance, and I'm just gonna share my heart right now. And I thought that was just an interesting premise for a short film.
You know, it is, and I like the conceit of the construction of the sandwich because it necessarily propels the plot along a little bit, because you know the sandwich has to get made to satisfy the order, but it also slows it down a little bit so the conversation can keep occurring. It's also a horrendous looking sandwich by the time Roger is done agreeing to almost every ingredient imaginable, you know, with all the ingredients, all the toppings, three different completely incompatible sauces. There's got to be some gastrointestinal consequence for him.
100%, 100%. Yeah. It's funny because just as you say it, it's like, you know, the sandwich ends up being a metaphor for his life, where he's just kind of going through, picking at random. And in the end, these were not the correct decisions. Like, maybe if you would have put a little more thought, a little bit more analysis into these decisions leading up to how they would all work out, it might be different. But yes, not a good sandwich at all.
Your two main characters are cast so well, George Russo as Roger and Saul Trujillo as Lenny. How did you come to them for these particular roles? Did you have them in mind all along?
So with Roger, I wrote it for George Russo, who is a very close friend of mine and just a extraordinary actor. And we've worked together on and off for more than a decade in a couple other projects, and always stayed close. And you know, George has, you know, he's been in theater, he's been in television shows, commercial, the whole nine, and he's an actor studio member, lifetime actor studio member, and he just, ever since he was actually in the first short film I ever made, like a decade ago, and from that moment when I didn't even know what I was doing, and and he trusted me to take a risk with his time and, you know, and his skill set. And even when I was navigating that, he was such an incredible pro, but also like has this wonderful blend of tragedy and comedy that I find so unique, because he just comes across as this, you know, he can really present himself in a way of this kind of desperate sadness, but then has this ferocious comedic timing and delivery, and that combination is just extraordinary to me. That's my dog. Trupo. Uh, is extraordinary to me. So I wrote it for him, and I was, luckily enough, I sent it to him, and he read it. He was he was a he was into it and agreed to do it, and so yeah, that was George. And then Saul, is my sister, is a stand-up comedian, and when I knew I kind of wanted the employee, I definitely wanted someone with some comedy chops, and I wanted someone um, who could identify with the situation and root themselves in the drama aspects as well. And so I talked to her about, you know, her stand-up comedian friends and network, and she read the script, and I kind of described what I was going for, and she immediately was like, "Oh, I got the guy." And she sent me his headshot, and I looked him up and started watching live performances of it. And coincidentally, the first thing he was talking about in the comedy bit that I watched was service jobs and his history of working nightmare situations at service jobs. And then we just sat down and talked about it, and he responded to the script and agreed to be a part of it, which I'm very grateful for.
It's like about an 11, maybe a 12-minute film, I think, if I recall
Yeah, like
correctly,
11 minute and
and
change.
and shot like all in a single location with just a brief glimpse of the exterior. I'm just wondering if you could talk a little bit about the challenges of doing that in what I assume is not only a restricted setting, but also a restricted time. Probably have restrictions of budget, props, materials, all of that come into play, I'm imagining, for a short film like this one.
Exactly. I mean, so the whole film was shot in one night, and it was shot over the course of one night at an actual sandwich chain shop just outside of LA. And we Charles Ellenson, who's the production designer, and his team transformed the entire place in a matter of hours. Just all the branding, all the signage, all the tablescapes, and everything else like that. Just to the sandwich wrappers, to wrappers, to the cups. Like, I mean, it was just a total overhaul and flip, and they just did phenomenal work. And the cast and crew collectively, cinematographer David Pierce, you know, we just they were just on it. So they allowed us to move at a very fast pace because, as I'm sure you saw, the film is really kind of more so like a play. Like it's more of it's a scene that kind of breathes in itself, and the whole kind of, idea behind the feeling of it was that feeling of like you're exactly what you said before, which is you walk into a sandwich shop, you've agreed that a sandwich is going to be made. And so it's almost like that claustrophobic situation of like, it doesn't matter how weird this conversation gets, or if someone gets offended or whatever, we've agreed we're going to stay until the sandwich is made and wrapped. So I wanted it to feel like that. So yeah, and all in all, we wrapped out and just sort of were leaving the place just as the sun was rising. And it was obviously there were some stressful points, and you try to get everything done, and you're moving so quickly. But I mean, everyone was truly professional and had a sense of urgency, and which allowed us to kind of get everything we needed to do done.
Some of what George Russo says as Roger is so inappropriate, bringing topics like masturbation and pornography into a sandwich order, that they struck me almost as they could have been improvised, but I'm assuming they weren't.
So it's funny, they were not improvised. Those subject matters were put in the original material by myself. And yeah, I mean, it was one of those things where I kept going back through my head again and again, and when I was writing it, of just being like, okay, I know where I want this to go, but realistically, how do we get there? How do we get two people with who never have known each other, who are in a weird situation, to sort of bond in some way or try to drop the gates in some way? And part of me was, you know, sort of came to the conclusion that there had to be a little bit of like a shock and awe effect. There had to be something where the employee at the start is so in the routine of here's another terrible customer. I don't care about this guy. I just want to get this sandwich and move. I'm done, and he's so in this headspace. Something has to just jolt him to be like, wait, what? You know, and then from there, there's this thing of, he's on his heels for a moment that allows, you know, some sort of forced like relatability because, by the fact of Roger forcing uh Lenny to acknowledge that yes, he might also masturbate, that like boom, that's one thing in common if there's nothing else in the entire world. So I felt like that weird out of the box thing was an interesting way to kind of enter the realm of them finding a bond.
Yeah, it does. And I'll just add too for our viewers, there's a moment really towards the end of the film where we really do see that this is an arc for both of these characters. That even though it's a short kind of incidental interaction in a subway shop, it does have an opportunity to impact each of their lives as they move forward after this narrative is concluded.
Yeah, no, that was the goal, was just that it wasn't to try to have them have some you know, full circle transformation, but the goal was that these two ships passing in the night had some significance. There was, at the end of this interaction, they're both going to leave with something. How they apply what they've felt or what they've learned from this is up to them, but that we there has been something significant enough that they will not forget it. And that was the kind of this, you know, the target I was aiming at.
Um, your career arc is one that's involved advertising, directing commercials, right? I'm just wondering where you see 2 cents and a foot long kind of fitting in the long term for you then.
Great question. So I my first love of, you know, getting into this from the very beginning was to make films. And you know, I happened to stumble into advertising and directing commercials, and that's all really fun and great. And it's great to exercise those muscles with crews, with deadlines, trying to, you know, execute creative visions and interesting sequences and shots and things. Um, but there is something very, very different about setting out to do a film that truly means something to you, that is an existentially fulfilling work. And for me, you know, 2 cents and a foot long is the first step in a road towards making feature films, you know, extended television series and things like that. My hope and dream is that that is, you know, kind of around the corner. And so in the meantime, I'm in the development of a couple different feature films, actually a couple additional short films. So there's a lot of things kind of percolating right now. But really, what is so what is so cool about 2 cents and a foot long for me is that it was the first time I had kind of returned to the narrative world in quite some time. You know, I just the commercials, you know, it's like one of those things where you wake up and 4 years have gone by and you're just like, what? You know, there's just you kind of always moving and you're busy. But I just, yeah, I just had this kind of continuous urge that just was telling me you gotta, you know, if you want to make films, you gotta make films. What are you doing? So I followed that voice, and that's what 2 cents and a foot long was for me.
I know it showed at Santa Barbara, and I'm wondering, were you able to be there when it showed and kind of
So,
gauge audience reaction a little bit or interact with viewers?
yeah, so I was there. They screened it twice, and I was there for both screenings. And I was lucky enough to have, you know, my fiance, my family, and friends, and other colleagues who worked on the film come up, and the cast came up and did a Q&A. And I got to tell you, it was truly a thrilling experience. It was just like, because it's actually the first film festival I've ever been to. So that shows you how ridiculous this whole situation is, because you know, commercials and you're busy, whatever. And like, and so we got into Santa Barbara, which is just an extraordinary film festival. For anyone who hasn't been, it is awesome. They shut down, you know, they don't shut down, but they have all of State Street from the Arlington Theater to a couple other theaters all the way down. So the whole festival is kind of surrounded in, you know, about maybe like a mile up and down or a quarter mile up and down. Everything is walkable. Everything is in downtown Santa Barbara. Everyone is excited about the festival, excited about the films, excited about meeting filmmakers. It was a dream. It was just so fun to to collaborate and to with Q&As and to meet other filmmakers who are so passionate. And so that's a long-winded way of answering your question, which is, so I was so nervous for the first screening because we went into the theater and I had never seen my work in a theater, because obviously commercials now they're on phones. You know, it's like it's almost like foreign. So I'm in there and I'm sweating bullets. I'm just like, you know, rocking back and forth in my seat. And then they play them in slates of like five short films together. And luck, you know, the other short films were all extraordinary. They were all really, really good. And it was really cool to be in their company. And when they finally played 2 Cents in a Foot Long, I was like spider senses on a 10. I'm like every noise, every movement, every gesture, I'm like waiting for, just assessing like rapid, like, okay. And it was awesome. People were laughing, you could tell people were moved at certain points, and just the applause or reception when the film was over. It was just, it was really cool. It seemed like, uh, of course, I'm biased, but it seemed like people really, really enjoyed it in both screenings and came away with it, coming up to me afterwards and saying, what the impact that the film had on them. They were very complimentary. It was a very cool experience.
That is really great, and I'm not surprised to hear it at all. I haven't been to Santa Barbara specifically, but I know the very best film festivals really can do that. And it certainly doesn't surprise me to hear how audiences are reacting to the film. Do you have other festivals lined up for it in the future?
So yeah, so we were accepted to Mammoth Film Festival, and then more recently Beverly Hills Film Festival. So the film is going to screen in LA at the Chinese Six at 1:30 p.m. on May 1st, which is a Wednesday. Uh, so tough, tough in the afternoon screening, but if people are available, it's, yeah, 1:30 p.m. on Wednesday, May 1st. It's going to screen for the Beverly Hills Film Festival.
That's excellent. I'm going to thank you for joining us, Kanan, today, and wish everybody involved with this the very best for the future success of 2 Cents and a Foot Long. And then I also wanted to give you the last word and just anything else you'd like to say about what you hope viewers will take from the film.
Well, first and foremost, thank you so much for taking the time. It's just so cool to be able to speak with someone who loves film like you do, and just your questions are awesome, and just is making me reflect on the whole process, which is so cool. Yeah, I mean, I guess for me, all I ever wanted to do was have something that resonated in an honest way about, feelings inside that maybe as we're going through life, and it's fast paced, and you feel like sometimes you want to connect with someone. Maybe you hold back, you don't say what's on your mind or in your heart. And what would life be like if you did? And you found that way to do that. So that's kind of like, the kind of underlying premise of the whole thing. And for me, I just hope that the story resonates, and it makes people feel something. That is, at the end of the day, that is the goal.
I'm sure it will, Kanan. Thank you again for speaking with us.
Of course. Thank you so much.